Hare Krishna. Let us continue with the second part of fine speech. We will look at some quotes from the Shastra and comment a little bit. Svacha prakrititasnigdo madhurya stirta burnrinam muni punatya pamitram iksho pasparsha kirtanaihi. So the word madhuryaha means sweet or gentle speech. Madhuryaha. O king, a saintly person is just like water because he is free from all contamination, gentle by nature, and by speaking creates a beautiful vibration like that of flowing water. Just by seeing, touching, or hearing such a saintly person, the living entity is purified, just as one is cleansed by contact with pure water. Thus, a saintly person, just like a holy place, purifies all those who contact him because he always chants the glories of the Lord. The words apam mitram, just like water, can also be read as agan mitram, which means that a saintly person purifies all living entities by accepting them as mitram or his personal friends and saves them from their sinful reactions. Aghat. The conditioned living entity falsely identifies with his gross material body and subtle mind and thus falls from the platform of spiritual knowledge. A conditioned living being is always lusty for material sense gratification, and if he does not acquire it, he becomes angry. Sometimes he is so obsessed with fear of losing his material gratification that he enters a stage approaching madness. A saintly person, however, is like pure water, free from all contamination and capable of purifying all things. Just as pure water is transparent, a saintly person transparently manifests the personality of Godhead within his heart. Such love of Godhead is the reservoir of all happiness. Water makes a most pleasing vibration as it flows and cascades, and similarly the sound vibration of the Lord's pure devotee, who is saturated with the glories of the Lord, is most charming and beautiful. Thus, by studying the nature of water, one can understand the symptoms of a pure devotee of the Lord. So, once in Zagreb, Croatia, I was passing in front of the room of Sacinandana Swami, and he called me in, and in his room he was playing Srila Prabhupada's tape. It was a lecture, and he said, "Oh Akrura, listen to this. Srila Prabhupada's voice is an ocean of compassion." So that was very, very beautiful. I loved it. And to go back to our verse, this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, it says that a saintly person, just like a holy place, purifies all those who contact him, or if one visits the holy place, he becomes purified. And there is a verse in the first canto which describes that the devotee is like a holy place and that association with him purifies everyone who comes in touch with him. So here it is said, by seeing, touching or hearing such a saintly person. And especially what is important, and which Srila Prabhupada stresses many, many times in his teachings, is hearing a saintly person, hearing and following his vani or his instructions. Hearing is more important than seeing, hearing is more important than touching. So madhuryaha, sweet or gentle speech, and we see that sometimes a saintly person is as hard as a thunderbolt, and sometimes he is as soft as a rose. So saintly person is sometimes sharp. He has sharp words, and with these sharp words, out of compassion, he actually cuts the knots of attachment of conditioned souls. But unfortunately, conditioned souls get scared. They run away. For example, a conditioned soul doesn't mind that family members insult him, but when he hears sharp words of a sadhu, he runs away. So this is very unfortunate. But if one understands that the strong words or sharp words of a sadhu are not meant to discourage him or to scare him, they are meant to purify him and to cut off the attachment that he has for the material world, then in such a case this person will actually benefit if they have this understanding. Among all things that purify, I am the wind, fire, the sun, water, and speech. So this is Krishna is speaking in the 11th canto, that one of the most important purifying agents is speech. So by your speech, you can purify yourself if you speak spiritual content, spiritual things, and also you can purify many, many others. And we have mentioned already in the first part that the most important quality of any man is how he speaks. This is what Srila Prabhupada says in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in his purport. One should see all things as expansions of the Supreme Lord's potency, and thus with speech, mind and senses one should offer respect to all things, without minimizing any living entity or material object. Since everything belongs to the Lord, everything ultimately should be engaged in the Lord's service with great care. A self-realized devotee tolerates personal insult and does not become envious of any living entity, nor does he see anyone as his enemy. This is practical enlightenment. Although a pure devotee may criticize those who obstruct the Lord's mission, such criticism is never personally motivated, nor is it ever based on enviousness. So this is a very important point. Criticism could be based on enviousness, and it might not be based on enviousness. And in the case of a pure devotee or a saintly person, their criticism of conditioned souls' wrongdoings is not enviousness, but it's actually their desire to help them get free from the bondage of material energy. An advanced devotee of the Lord may chastise his followers or criticize the demoniac, but only to carry out the mission of the Supreme Lord, and never out of personal enmity or enviousness. Again, the same point is stressed. Why is the advanced devotee, sometimes criticizing demoniac people or being strict with his followers. A transcendentalist who does not control his speech and mind will find that his spiritual discipline and austerity gradually seep away and are lost. So we have seen this in practice, that people engage in austerities, even engage in the mission, even engage in spreading Krishna consciousness, but they cannot control the mind and they cannot control their speech, and they sometimes speak harshly to devotees, and they sometimes offend devotees, and then they lose the results of their austerity and spiritual discipline. So you may have perfect sadhana, but if you offend devotees, then you will lose your credits. One must control the mind, senses and speech by higher intelligence so that one's life will be successful. So that means that we have higher intelligence, and higher intelligence is coming from the super soul. And here it is said one must control the mind, senses and speech. So we need to be very careful what we say and how we say it, and in this way control the speech and use the speech in the service of the Lord in the best possible way. Being surrendered to me, one should control the speech, mind and life air, and then through loving devotional intelligence, one will completely fulfill the mission of life. Now here is a beautiful phrase, LDI, loving devotional intelligence. And then here, this verse from the 11th canto mentions the mission of life. So mission of life is self-realization, development of Krishna consciousness and spreading Krishna consciousness. So how does one control the speech, mind and life air? It is said, through loving devotional intelligence. So we may check is our intelligence devotional, is our intelligence loving, is our intelligence used to benefit others or to develop a more loving heart. So these are some things to consider. By strict control of one's body, mind and speech, the quality of tolerance becomes strengthened, and thus one manifests the further qualities of forgiving others, never wasting one's time, detachment from sense gratification, lack of false pride in one's work, and not hankering for liberation. So control of the body, mind and speech is actually results in developing these amazing qualities like tolerance and ability to forgive. Many people are not able to forgive. Even those who are practicing spiritual life, they are not able to forgive. And that creates problems for themselves. That creates problems for others. Although the false ego has no factual basis, it is perceived in many forms as the functions of the mind, speech, life air, and bodily faculties. But with the sword of transcendental knowledge, sharpened by worship of a bona fide spiritual master, a sober sage will cut off this false identification and live in this world free from all material attachment. We have a long way to go to achieve this level, but this is like a benchmark or a signpost or a goalpost that is Srimad Bhagavatam, or Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us what to achieve and how to actually get free from the false ego. So one thing in relation to speech is that false ego is manifested through our speech. How do we speak? And now if I say this, you may say, yes, I have seen this in others. I have seen how others' false ego is manifested in their speech. But we will benefit more from this verse if we become a little introspective and then think, how is my false ego manifesting in my speech? And then try to correct that. Until one has fully developed the ability to see me within all living beings, one must continue to worship me by this process with the activities of his speech, mind and body. So how do we worship the Lord with our speech? We worship the Lord with our power of speech by chanting the holy name of the Lord, by reciting the scriptures, by discussing the scriptures, by preaching to others, by preaching to ourselves. And instruction is continue to worship me by this process of the activities of speech, mind and body. So then in this verse what is important is ability to see me within all living beings. So now if you see the Lord in every living being and you know the Lord is watching you, or the Lord is watching us, the Lord is actually hearing what we speak, what we say, then when we see the Lord in everyone's heart, we will be very careful how do we talk to these people. Imagine if Krishna is personally present, as he is present, but we cannot see him, and then he is listening how we are talking to our family, how we are talking to our children, how we are talking to devotees. So we would be probably much more careful what we say, and we would avoid being rude. The citizens governed by these low-class kings will imitate the character, behavior, and speech of their rulers. Harassed by their leaders and by each other, they will all suffer ruination. Now this is the description from the 12th canto about Kali Yuga predictions, that there will be low-class leaders, low-class kings, and people will follow. So, yadyada charati shreshtas, tata devetaro janaha sayat prabharam kurute, lokastadanuvartate. People have a tendency to follow the leader, and they imitate the character and the behavior and also the speech of their rulers. So who is our role model for speaking? You may say Srila Prabhupada, and then when Srila Prabhupada is speaking very strongly, maybe we try to imitate this, but because we are not Srila Prabhupada and we are not so pure and we are not free from envy, then it will not have the same effect. So it's not about imitating the leader, but it's about following in the footsteps of a leader and always having in mind what is the purpose of my speech and what will be the result of my speech. Sri Markandeya said, "O Almighty Lord, how can I possibly describe you? You awaken the vital air, which then impels the mind, senses, and power of speech to act." So here is a little bit of technical description in the purport of the 12th canto, that vital air induces the power of speech. If our mind, senses, speech, money, and energies are thus engaged in the service of Krishna, then we are no longer in material nature. By virtue of spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, we transcend the platform of material nature. This is introduction to Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is about Yukta Vairagya, engaging everything that is available in the material nature in the service of Krishna. And then this spiritualizes the whole atmosphere and we are not living any longer in the material world. Mitam chasaram cha vacho hi vagmita iti. Now this is a famous verse, and I believe you will like it, and devotees quote it sometimes. Mitam chasaram cha vacho hi vagmita iti. Mitam, concise, saram, essential, vacha, speech, vagmita, eloquence. Essential truth, spoken concisely, is true eloquence. So if you want a reference for this is Adi Lila, first chapter, text 107. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 1, text 107. And if you want all these quotes, which I'm using for this audio message, then I can send you the Word file where I have collected these quotes and have a nice readable text with all these quotes and references. Srila Prabhupada said one should speak only of essentials earlier in the Bhagavad Gita. He says one should speak only of essentials. So we don't have to speak too much, but we also don't want to speak too little. And we want to speak essential truths. Essential truths in relation to the goal of life, purpose of life, or in any situation we want to speak as much as necessary. Brahma pramada vipralipsa karana patava arsha vigya vakya nahi dosha eisaba. Mistakes, illusion, cheating, and defective perception do not occur in the sayings of the authoritative sages. Now, this verse describes the content of the words of authoritative sages, like for example Mahajans. And Mahajans' teachings are described in the Shastra, in the Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures. Maharaja's lives, Mahajana's lives, Mahajana's teachings, Mahajana's behavior, and their speech. So the exquisite quality of their speech is there is no mistakes, no illusion, no cheating, and no defective perception. And as you know, these are the 4 flaws or 4 imperfections of conditioned souls. They make mistakes, they are in illusion, they are inclined to cheat, and they have a defective perception. Their senses are imperfect, and therefore their perception is defective or faulty. So the words of authoritative sages or their teachings are devoid of all these 4 qualities. The Sanskrit statements of Srimad Bhagavatam are all transcendental sounds. Srila Vyasadeva revealed these statements after perfect realization, and therefore they are perfect, for liberated sages like Vyasadeva never commit errors in their rhetorical arrangements. Unless one accepts this fact, there is no use in trying to obtain help from the revealed scriptures. Now this commentary of Srila Prabhupada indicates that we should have faith in the scriptures, and we should have faith that the words of liberated sages are not the same as the words of conditioned souls. And now we have a famous verse from the Nectar of Instruction. Vacho vegam, manasa kroda vegam, jihva vegam, udaro pasta vegam, etan vegan yo vishaheta diraha, sarvam apimam pritivimsa shishyat. One who can control the forces of speech, mind, anger, belly, tongue, and genitals is known as a Goswami and is competent to accept disciples all over the world. So I think that this is not only for someone who wants to become a Diksha Guru, it's important for every preacher and even for every devotee who wants to sometimes share the message or who wants to preach. the message of Krishna consciousness. So one has to control the forces of speech, mind, anger, belly, tongue, and genitals. And controlling the force of speech means avoiding harsh speech and speaking spiritual topics, speaking about spiritual topics, speaking about Krishna consciousness, spiritual advancement, thinking about these things, speaking about these things, and using the power of voice for devotional service. So thank you very much for listening. This was a part 2 of our small series on fine speech, and we will continue with part 3 some of the next days.